Hi everyone, welcome to week 7 of your technical math class. This week we are covering chapter 6. Chapter 6 is all about ratio and proportion and how we use ratio and proportion to solve problems. So let's take a look first at what exactly is a ratio. A ratio is really just a comparison. All we are doing is comparing two different quantities. What makes a ratio different from a fraction's comparing a part to a whole, whereas a ratio is just comparing two different things. So it could be two of the same kinds of things, but it doesn't have to be. So for example, say we want to find out, how fast we're going, or how many miles per gallon we get in our car. Those are all ratios. So miles per hour, miles per gallon, those are ratios. We're just comparing two quantities. And so your book defines a ratio as being able to, any kind of thing where we can write it as A to B, where the colon means that two. And a lot of times you'll see it written as a fraction, but it doesn't have to be. So we could write A to B with the word two. We can write the colon, which also means the word two, or we can write the fraction bar. So all three of these things mean the same thing. The key to this is that B, the bottom number, if you're writing it as a fraction, can't be 0. And of course, the reason for this, why can't it be 0? Well, because it's a division problem, right? We can't ever divide by 0. So it should make sense. It should be kind of intuitive that second number can never be 0 in order for this to work properly. So let's look at a few examples of how to write a ratio. Remember, it's just a comparison. So if it's a comparison, in this case it says, what's the ratio of women to men? Well, we have 15 women, 17 men. The one thing that I want you to make sure that you're doing as you're writing them, your book doesn't necessarily do this, but write down the units of measure, because that's going to help you keep things where they need to be. So on this one, I would have written 15 women over 17 men. Then when you're asked to write a different ratio, in this case, write it the other way around. Write the ratio of men to women. If you're writing the unit, it makes it a little more clearer. You can, easily see that it's 17 men over 15 women. So as you're doing these, please make sure that you're writing those units of measure, because that's going to be really key, especially as we translate this whole process into solving problems. So it's really, really important that you write those units. Now, the next piece of this then is taking that ratio and learning how to write it in lowest terms. And all that means is reducing the fraction. So if the ratio in this case is 15 to 10, and we want it in lowest terms, we're just looking to see what number will go into both top and bottom, just like we did with fractions. So in this case, we can divide both top and bottom by 5, and we're left with 3 to 2. And again, even though the book doesn't really show you this, I would like you to write the units of measure. So you would write 3 feet over 2 feet. So the ratio is 3 to 2. Now look at this one. This one says, which one represents the ratio 4 to 1? 4 is the first number, so if you were writing it in terms of a fraction, it would always be the top. So that would be a letter B on this one. The next one shows you how to write a ratio in terms of whole numbers, because fractions typically don't have decimals, right? We want to see a fraction in whole number form. So notice what they did on this one. The first thing that they did was get rid of the decimals by multiplying the top and the bottom by 100. So keep in mind, whatever you do to one, you have to do to the other. So in order to get rid of the 2 places in the bottom, we have to multiply by 100. So if we're going to multiply 100 on top, we got to multiply by 100 on, if we multiply on the bottom by 100, we got to multiply on the top by 100. Then we can go from there and use our steps to reduce it, to write it in lowest terms, which is what they're showing you on the second line. So what they did first was get rid of those decimals. Then they did the reduction. Now, as you go through this, they're going to talk about all kinds of different ways we use ratios, different ways we compare. One of the things you'll want to make sure you understand is how ratios are unit conversions, how we can convert them to unit measures. What that simply means is, like we just talked about at the very beginning, miles per gallon, miles per hour. We want them per 1 hour, right? We don't want to know how fast we're going in 2 hours. We don't talk like that, right? We want to know we're going 60 miles an hour, not 120 miles in 2 hours. That doesn't make sense. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a unit measure. So we want to make sure that we know how to reduce and make a unit measure. A lot of times we'll use that when we're shopping. If something is so many for a certain amount of money, we want to know how much is it for one. So that is what we're talking about when we talk about a unit measure. So make sure you understand what a unit measure is. That's per one, okay? They're also going to talk about rates. A rate is another type of ratio that's used to compare different quantities, but typically it's things like we have these words that you think of when you think of a rate. So per, like per hour. For, like I said, when you're buying something. In, when we're talking about a time frame. And how much we can go, how far we can go on so many gallons of gas. Those are all, excuse me. Those are all things that we think about when we think of a rate. So that's going to be covered as well in this first section. Now, once you know how to do all of these, how to find these rates, how to find, a cost, for example, or how to put something in ratio form, then we're going to use them to write a proportion. And a proportion is just an equation where we have two ratios that are equal to each other. So it's two fractions that are going to be equal to each other. So they give you some examples in your textbook, but the key here is that it's again like a teeter-totter. Everything is the same on one side compared to the other. And if we're missing one of these pieces, we can use what's called cross multiplication to solve and find a missing piece. We can also use cross multiplication to check it to see if it's a proportion. So here's an example of that. So here we've got a proportion. And the way we check it is we cross multiply. So 3 times 15, 5 times 9. If they equal the same amount, then we know it's a proportion. So the converse of that then is using that idea to solve a proportion. So we're going to set those cross products equal to each other and then find the missing piece. So that's how we solve a proportion. And here's an example. We have a missing piece on top. X over 13 equals 6 over 39. So we're going to cross multiply. You're going to multiply the things catty corner from each other. So X times 39 is going to equal 6 times 13. Once you do that multiplication, that 6 times 13 is 78. Now we still have to get the letter all by itself. So we always want to divide by whatever is with that letter. In this case, 39. So that's what they're showing you here, dividing both sides by 39. So the left side, these 39s cancel, and all you're left with is X. On the right side, we have to actually do the math. 78 divided by 39 will give you 2. So that's what the rest of the chapter is all about, is how to solve a proportion and use a proportion to solve practical types of problems. So as you go through the material this week, if you have any problems or questions, please make sure you reach out to me. And make sure you can either call, email, text, any of those things. And have a great week.